Welcome, everyone. We have another exciting episode planned here at the Free Speech Forward podcast. Today, my co host Chris and I are delighted to speak with Ilana to hear her stories and ideas all about free speech. If you guys haven't checked out any of our earlier episodes, you definitely should. We've built up quite a catalog already in just the few months we've been in existence. And if you don't know, Chris and I are from the organization 1776 Forward, and this is our project in partnership with the Institute for Liberal Values. And this is coming out of a further project that the ILV is doing with a bunch of other organizations. And Alana's going to tell you all about it.
Hi, Ilana. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Great to have you. Just for our listeners out there, we'll just give a brief background on Ilana. Ilana Cohen is the Community Engagement Director at the Alliance for Constructive Ethnic Studies, or ACES. She's responsible for working with parents, students, and the community in building an empowering ethnic studies curriculum in California public high schools. Previously, Ilana worked for 15 years as an attorney in the Bay Area, and she is a child refugee from the Soviet Union. She has a great appreciation, given that background, for the freedoms, opportunities, and responsibilities of American citizenship. So, Ilana, we loved hearing everyone's origin story, if you will. So, why don't you tell us, how did you come to your involvement with ACES and even just being a leader for free speech and philosophically liberal values more generally?
So like you mentioned, I am a child refugee from the Soviet Union, which is pretty famous for not allowing free speech. So that's always been something that has been near and dear to me after hearing all the stories that plagued my family and many others living in the Soviet Union for decades. I've become much more engaged in the space in the last year since joining ACES, which really fights for a lot of the critical thinking, analysis, discourse in K-12 classrooms. I, as you mentioned, spent over a decade in the legal world. And last year, after October 7th, I was just very surprised to hear about what was going on the college campuses, that students weren't allowed to disagree with each other, that disagreeing students weren't allowed into spaces taken over by various groups, that there was a lot of violent rhetoric. And I couldn't believe that. So I went to a rally and I heard a lot of the speech that they were using, and it just didn't make a lot of common sense to me, given what a privileged life you lead. This was at Stanford, one of the most beautiful places in the world. And the two didn't seem right, like glorifying violence and murder and really promoting it and not allowing other students into that space. And then going to the school hall, and enjoying everything that Stanford has to offer. So I started to look into it, and I was just shocked to hear that a lot of it was coming from this type of indoctrination in the K-12 educational space. And that's when I started volunteering with ACES. And eventually joining it full time.
Real citizen activism from the ground up.
And I love how your personal story then even just ties into and feeds the observations that you were making, how what you could see so clearly goes against everything that you experienced from your background. So I'm curious, like, what would you say to those people that you heard who, as you said, didn't even sound like they were making what you would regard as common sense? What would you say to them as to why free speech is so important and is such a value if you want a flourishing, healthy society?
Yeah, so first, I think that protesting and going to rallies is great. I was very active on college campuses myself, but what was really lacking was the ability to have civic engagement and discourse, to live in a world outside of just black and white. and to learn to have engagement, to have discussions, to have critical thinking, not just to be
Mhm.
taught you need to think this one specific ideology, this one specific thought. And if you don't think that, we're kicking you out of the group, we're kicking you out of this space, and we don't want to talk to you. When I was a student, it was really the opposite. When people came to us and said, I have a different opinion, we would say, let's literally sit down and have a conversation and learn from each other's experiences and
Mhm.
find out how to exist in reality, in all the shades of gray that make up reality, and not this false dichotomy of good and bad. And you just can't have a democracy when the world is broken up into good guys and bad guys based on whatever's popular, whatever your leaning is, because that's not a democracy. That's a dictatorship where whatever the majority opinion of of the time is, whatever is popular at the time, dictates what you're going to do and what you're going to say and what's allowed in the spaces around you. And that's been really shocking to see uh, in the educational system, and that students really aren't being encouraged to think and analyze and speak critically.
Mhm. I'm curious. I'm not sure uh, when exactly you left the Soviet Union, but did you, to the extent you have memories from that period before you moved, did you see kind of a similar phenomenon there, and did that kind of make the connection, I guess, clearer for you to see when you saw it here in the U.S.?
So my stories definitely come from my family, much
Mm-hmm.
more, and they are very prevalent in our family history. Though the Bay Area is really, I feel so privileged to share and hear about so many immigrant stories, and
Mm-hmm.
I hear a lot of the same kind of story from immigrants from all over the world, which is that if you had a dissenting opinion, the police are going to the KGB is going to show up at your door at 2 a.m. and
Mm-hmm.
that's it. The same is. I have friends from Taiwan who had to flee if their parents said something that wasn't allowed, and that's still going on all over the world. But we don't want that here. That's what we are so
You
proud
can't
of, is that
escape
we're
that. Yeah.
able to
Yeah.
to to disagree, and we're able to do so in a manner that encourages everyone to learn something and to move forward, past whatever misconceptions arose before.
I really appreciate even your focus on learning and then you're taking those examples from history and how we can apply them, and I can see how that's clearly part of what you're doing now with the current work you're doing. So maybe you could even expound on that a little bit, and like one of the questions we even love to ask people is like, if you had all the resources and money and time to put into something, perhaps educational or maybe even beyond that, like what would you think would be like one of the best projects we could do to help support others to learn about the value and importance and necessity of free speech?
Yeah, I've always believed that education is just the most critical tool uh, for our society, and that when we learn about different backgrounds and when we learn to engage with others, that is really the foundation of our entire society. So I mean, personally invested my energy into ACES and into this fight to bring that kind of discourse into the K to 12 classroom. These are young minds, and they look to their districts, to their schools, for guidance and learning. And this is the time when those elements really form in students' brains, and they learn how to engage. And doing so, providing resources for districts and for teachers to make sure that their students are learning to do that, I think that's the most important thing that we can focus on.
Well said. I mean, I like how you put it about, just kind of learning about the diversity of people's experiences. It's somewhat of a cliche these days, and often I think even used by those who are not necessarily friendly to free speech rights. But when they say diversity is our strength, but I think what you hit at is true as a core part of why free speech matters, is that we are all the diversity of even us as individuals, even in a society that is more ethnically or racially or religiously homogenous versus ours. You still have the diversity of each individual's perspective. And if you can't share your differing views or learn from someone else's differing experience, then you miss out on that learning opportunity, which is the seedling for growth.
So I think that's what we really promote with the ethnic studies curriculum, and it's what people, when they hear that ethnic studies is now required in California high schools, that's what they
Mm,
think is going to be taught, and that's personally what I thought I was going to find, and that's been the real shocking part, is that some activists have really kind of taken over that curriculum to push very specific, narrow ideology where students don't feel comfortable uh, raising their hand and expressing a different opinion. They don't feel comfortable asking what the source of the information was. Is it a YouTube video, or is it an actual textbook or some kind of historical reference? They don't feel comfortable being the one student, and who would, to stand up in a classroom and say something opposing the teacher, not opposing other students, but opposing the
mm,
teacher. And
mm-hmm.
schools are really here for the benefit of the students, not the
Right.
teachers. And so it's the students that need to feel safe and secure in the classroom and safe to express their views. And unfortunately, that's just not always happening. I've heard from, dozens and dozens of students that they don't feel comfortable rewriting essays multiple times until their teacher agrees with the conclusion, having to leave classrooms, having to leave the whole district, just for having a different opinion.
Wow. Yeah, and certainly that's not an environment where uh, passing value judgments or even questioning perhaps some of the ethnic studies that are taught, right, or ideas that are pushed, that's not an environment where they're probably encouraged to do so, I'd
They're
imagine.
really not allowed to do so. They're often just blatantly told to regurgitate the teacher's perspectives, and there's just
Mm,
no room to to dissent. And students shouldn't have to be dissidents to express an opinion. It's the classroom. They should always feel comfortable doing so. It's their
mm,
classroom. That's their right
mhm,
as an American
mm.
student, and it's really foundational to the public educational or the American educational system. So it's very discouraging to see that becoming a trend now, and that's what we're doing, is fighting against.
It's a sentiment I know both Chris and I definitely share, and want to help promote the reverse, really help promote people to feel free, to have that free expression that is our right. So I'm curious what advice or tips you might have to help people find, is it courage? Is it just groundedness? Like, I'm curious to hear what you would say, what it is that can help people feel that safety and comfort to be themselves and to speak up whatever it is that is on their minds.
It can be hard. It depends on your environment. There is a lot of ways to get involved, and I do see it has been really encouraging and optimistic to see parents, students, community members uh, stand up and just say, "I have a different opinion, and can this district provide me a safe space to express it without being booed or attacked in the hallway?" Uh, and for parents, we say find out. It's your right to know what your student is being taught. Just find out. That'll answer the first question. This isn't a crazy thing. It's your child in school. You absolutely should know what they're learning in every subject. Uh, it's something that you probably want to know either way. And so just ask the teacher. They'll tell you it's not a secret, or it shouldn't be a secret. And from there, there's so many ways to get involved. You can have a relationship with your school, building positive relationships with your teachers, the administration, the district, being vocal, using your voice in school board meetings, and building a community are really easy ways to get involved, that differing levels of courage, but anyone can get involved. And always the important piece is educating yourself and learning.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it is always encouraging when you don't feel alone to do that. So perhaps some of these more public forums, whether it's going with people who share some of your views and feeling kind of that sense of solidarity, or just being there and hearing others standing up and speaking out, that can, I think, oftentimes encourage people to find their voice as well. So
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
like your emphasis on that.
It really, when you reach out to people in your community, you feel like part of the community. You feel safer expressing how you feel, and you can learn from one another. It's really the same for the students in the classrooms, but as adults, you would hope that we would be able to do that uh, more easily. And we do see that. And uh, just myself personally, I feel much more connected to my local community, and have gotten to know a lot of people in my district, in my community, and feel much more welcomed and secure in expressing those thoughts.
Wow, and that's all happened in what, like just the last year? Did you say that you got
Since
really
the
active in
last
this?
year, yes, yes.
Wow. So there you go for everybody who's listening. It doesn't take a lifetime of experience or expertise working on these things to get involved and find a community and find your voice.
Yes, I think anyone can get involved. There's there's so much to get involved with, like I said, in your community, school board meetings and regional activities. So yes, I encourage everyone to at the very least get involved in your student's life, in your local community, and you have a voice. Use it.
Yeah. And the more you use it, the better the more confident you will be. I have found
Exactly.
so. So, Joy, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, I think that is going to be the title of this episode for sure. You have a voice, use it.
And finding community, yes, some great lessons there. Well, we're pretty much out of time now, so really appreciate your time, Ilana, joining us. And again, she's with the Alliance for Constructive Ethnic Studies. If you're in California, or if you're just interested in what they're doing and maybe looking to replicate it in your own state where this is an issue, you can look them up at Cal calethstudies.org. That's CALETH studies.org.
Cal
And
Studies, like California Ethnic Studies.
Cal Eth, I mean, this is the problem with trying to read acronyms in a URL, but thank
I
you
know.
for clarifying. calethstudies.org. And as always, you can find our episodes at our website, linked 1776forward.com, or ILV's, ilvalues.org, and on ILV's podcast channels under the Dissidents podcast. Thanks. We'll talk to you next time.